Hey everyone, my name is Sean and today I'm talking to you from Venice and I'm actually not alone. I'm here with my dear friend Olly.
Hey guys.
Olly Riches from I Will Teach You a language blog. Now, I'm not the only one learning languages and doing all these missions because Olly did something very similar this year. Olly, tell us a little bit about your mission to learn Italian this year.
Yeah, so it was just that. It was a mission to learn Italian. I decided I've been wanting to learn Italian for a long time, like many people. I mean, an amazing language.
Yeah.
And I meet often lots of Italian people where I live in London, and I thought, okay, well, now's the time to learn the language. So I decided to learn Italian for 3 months over this summer.
Yeah, I see. Now, Olly and me, we agree. We like our method to learn language is we agree on many things, but this time Olly did something. His approach was a little bit different than mine. As you guys know, I also did an Italian challenge to see how far I can get in Italian in just 30 lessons, and I focused on speaking. That's what we always do at Language Boost here. Now, Olly had a different method this time. What was your approach, Olly?
Yeah, so my approach was to have a lot of input. The whole method was an input-based approach.
Yeah.
So rather than take lessons or study textbooks or do anything like that, learn grammar, didn't do any of that stuff. I simply started by listening and reading to lots and lots of Italian every single day, and that's what I've done throughout the whole project.
Yeah.
So lots and lots of listening and reading. After the first month I started speaking as well, but the basis of the method is input, and the idea is that through that input you get to learn the language.
Yeah.
There's more to it, but that's the basic.
Yeah.
The basic
now we will
outline.
add a little disclaimer here. Olly used to speak a little Italian, like what, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean 17 years ago.
17 years ago, and Olly speaks very well Spanish and Portuguese. So, was that helpful? Did that help?
Yeah, it was helpful. I mean, so if you already know one or more Romance languages, obviously. You've already got a head start. You understand how grammar works in Latin-based languages. So that was helpful. I think, as far as I'm concerned, the Italian that I used to know is basically gone because although I did know some and I could speak a little, after that I went on to learn Spanish and Portuguese and spoke those for 17 years. So I kind of. There may have been a little bit of Italian left over, but not much. Nothing to speak of.
To be honest, I was a little bit skeptical in the beginning when Olly said that he was going to learn Italian and I was only going to focus on input, on listening, reading and listening.
Well, I wasn't sure either. I mean, it was an experiment for me too.
But now we've been here a few days in Italy, and as you can also see in the video that we published on Olly's channel, Olly speaks really good Italian. So tell us a little bit more about this approach, because how is it possible to speak a language? It's basically what you did after the first month, right? Yeah. Without ever having spoken that language. Like how do you start? Like you want to make a sentence and all of a sudden you're going to have all the words there?
Yeah.
Of how does it work?
Well,
of course you have reference languages.
Yeah, so to be clear, like the timeline looked like this. So in the first month I just did lots and lots of input in Italian, and then after the first month I carried on with the input, with the listening and reading, but I also started doing lots of speaking. So in the last 2 months I've done lots and lots of speaking as well. The idea behind the method is that you're going to make a lot more progress if when you start to have conversations in the language you can already understand a lot. And so through the input-based method, what this allowed me to do was, when I started having these conversations in the second month, I was already able to understand a lot of what the people were saying to me, which meant that I could be involved in the conversation a lot more than I would have done if the only thing I'd learned to do was to learn phrases to speak, for example. But obviously, right when I first started speaking, right at the beginning, it was a bit of a mess. I mean, it was a bit of Italian, bit of Spanish, bit of French, all that stuff. But that's fine because it's all part of a process. And so the main thing that I did was, after that point, was to kind of carry on. And then over the second and the third month, and I'm going to take the camera from Jan because his hand is getting a bit.
Yeah.
And then after the second and the third month, over the course of that time, I was able to, I just went gradually refining what I learned, improving my grammar, learning more vocabulary. It's a long-term process.
Now, if you want to reach like a level at where you can hold conversation just by listening, I can imagine that you need to put in many hours, right? And that's basically what you did. So how intense was it for you? Like, how many hours were you listening to Italian on a daily basis? And how can you make this practical for busy people?
Yes, I was tracking it, and it ended up being about 12 hours of listening a week.
12 hours.
And about 15,000 words of reading a week.
Yeah.
That was basically what it was, which equates to about 2 to 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
And when you hear 2 to 3 hours a day, it sounds like an awful lot.
No.
But specifically what I did was 1 hour of kind of sit-down study. So for the first hour of the day, I would listen and read to Italian at the same time. So I was reading stuff and then listening to the transcripts, or listening to stuff and then reading the transcripts. So I was focused on listening and reading. For the second and third hour of the day, I was just mostly listening to stuff whenever I had the chance, on the bus, on the train. And it's really surprising, if you commute at all, then you can almost certainly get in at least an hour, if not 2 hours extra. Yeah. So, in the gym, that's 45 minutes to an hour of extra stuff right there. On the train, commuting, that's an extra hour right there. So, I think, certainly in my case, it was possible to find the time. The most important thing was to have this attitude of, right, okay, whenever I have free time, whenever I have downtime, the Italian goes on the earphones, and I listen. Or I read. Like you've got to have this mentality of really using every minute that you have to get that exposure, that immersion.
Now, as we can see from the other videos and also from what I have witnessed here in Italy, seeing Olly speaking Italian, this project, I think we can say that it turned out to be a success. Now, as I said,
I'm really happy.
As I earlier said, Italian is related to a few languages that you already speak. Do you also think it's possible to use this method, like for people who want to learn a language that is completely unrelated? Let's say that you want to learn Indonesian. Would you still use the same approach? Would you still try it, or what do you think is possible here?
I think I would, because I think the variable is time. It's just going to take longer. And I remember chatting when I was thinking about this project. I was chatting to Steve Kaufman, who suggested I do this in the first place. And he uses this approach. He said that in Italian it'll take you X amount of time. If you were to do it in German, it might take you a little bit longer. And I think in general the principle is the same. You need to understand enough of the language, and that if you understand enough, then it's going to be a fairly easy transition to speaking. I mean, that's the principle. It's not necessarily the quickest. I mean, I think a kind of vocab booster type approach is going to get you speaking very early on, very quickly. I think though, if you take the approach that I have, and you're really spending 2 or 3 hours listening and reading a day. I mean, you can't get good in any language without spending
a lot of
thousands of hours with it. So really, I mean, I think we all eventually do the same kind of thing, basically. I mean, I learn phrases as well in much the same way that Jan does. I've been using flashcards throughout my project to store and practice key phrases. I think when you really zoom out from a kind of bird's eye view, there isn't really much difference. I think when we talk about these methods, it's really a question of how we order the puzzle, how we order the pieces of the puzzle in the early stage. But ultimately, just like your Chinese, which is very good, the way that you got very good at Chinese was by spending 2 years in China, speaking every day,
every single day.
It's whatever you do to get started, eventually to get good at that language, you've got to do a lot of it.
Yes, eventually, if you want to, really become fluent, really master language, you need to put in the hours, and there's no way to there are not really any shortcuts for this. I do think that, like in the polyglot community, or here, like among the polyglots, or the people that speak many languages, I do think that there are like two major approaches. So we have like Benny Lewis started with this
Speak from day one.
Speak from day one approach, and then of course we have Steve Kaufman with that focuses more on input. In the end,
I mean, I've done both. That's the interesting thing for me, because I used to be much more in the camp of learn to speak right away. The interesting thing that I did in this project was I didn't let myself speak for the first month. I forced myself not to speak. As an experiment. I think, you know, I was really gagging to speak even after the first couple of weeks. It was really hard actually to not speak. So again, I think the conclusion of this video, and I think we already knew it, but that there is not one best way to learn a foreign language, but you need to find a way, a method. Well, my way is best.
Olly's way is best.
Let's be clear, go on.
But it depends on your approach, right? So we always say, make fast progress in the beginning so that you can hold basic conversation, that you can go to the country, use all these, have small interactions and get that motivation. But on the other end,
that's a really important point, because I think as people who have learned quite a lot of languages, we're able to experiment, to try new things, because we've got that initial confidence. But most people, if they're new to language learning, the thing that ultimately causes the biggest problems and would lead them to give up or feel that they're failing is to not feel enough progress. People need to feel that early progress. So, the real benefit of something like Vocab Booster, for example, is that
speak from day one approach in general.
That it gets you very quick results. You're able to start speaking literally right away using very useful, practical phrases. So so who's that good for? That is good for the person who wants to get that early motivation from speaking. The way that I learned Italian this time is the total opposite. It's like it's telling you not to speak. And generally we do want to encourage people to speak. Like that's super important. It's just that in my case, like, because I've got the self-belief and the confidence that I will be able to speak. I mean, you're not going to be able to stop me speaking. I'm going to do it. So because I've got that experience,
you can do it.
I'm okay not speaking for that first month because
that eventually
I know that that time's going to come, and a month isn't that long. When you've got confidence in the process.
Okay, guys, I think that was it. If you want to check out how well Olly speaks Italian, or if you want to know more about his Italian learning journey, then feel free to check out his blog or his YouTube channel. We're shooting a video series here in Venice.
Check out the grand finale video.
The grand finale video
is the one at the end of my project. We shot it here in Venice. It's basically James Bond in Venice.
It's better than James Bond, I think.
I think it's better than James Bond.
Yeah. Who did editing for that video?
Some very famous director. But you'll put a link to this that video at the end of right now. Oh no, shit! If we say right now, that means the video ends. But you put an end screen on the end, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.